Evelyn was moments away from drifting into sleep when the soft knock came. The house was still, the only sound the faint hum of the heater in the hallway. She had pulled the blanket up to her chin, her body finally sinking into rest after a long day, when the knock startled her awake. It was gentle, almost hesitant, as if the person behind the door wasn't sure if they should disturb her. Evelyn sat up, her heart skipping. Who could it be at this hour? Her first thought was that something might be wrong. Daniel, her 24-year-old son, rarely came to her room at night. He was independent, the kind of young man who handled his own worries without running to his mother. For him to knock, at midnight no less, it meant something unusual was going on. She reached for her robe, slipped it over her shoulders, and crossed the room. The hallway light spilled under the door, and with a steadying breath, she turned the knob. Daniel stood there, tall but uneasy, his eyes carrying a mix of nerves and something else she couldn't quite place. He looked nothing like the little boy who used to sneak into her bed after a bad dream, but in that moment, she could see the trace of vulnerability in him. His voice was quiet, almost unsure. "Mom, are you awake?" Evelyn nodded, her worry sharpening. "Yes, I'm awake. Is everything all right?" He hesitated, then gave a faint, nervous smile. "I need to talk to you. Can we sit for a while?" Her instinct told her this was serious. She followed him into the living room, where the faint glow of a lamp lit the corner of the couch. They sat together, the silence stretching long enough for her to hear the steady tick of the wall clock. Evelyn waited, patient but alert, her gaze fixed on her son's restless hands. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and took a deep breath. "Mum, I need to tell you something important." Those words landed heavily. Mothers knew when a conversation was about to change things, and Evelyn braced herself. She studied his face, the way his eyes avoided hers, the way he kept pressing his palms together. It wasn't trouble at work. It wasn't about money. This looked different. This looked personal. Finally, he looked up. "I've met someone." The relief was instant. Her shoulders softened, and for a fleeting second, Evelyn smiled. She had expected worse. The way he had built up to it, she thought he might be carrying bad news. Instead, he was confessing something that carried a spark of hope. Her voice warmed. "That's wonderful, Daniel. Who is she?" But Daniel didn't return her smile. Instead, he shifted, uneasy again, his expression serious. "It's not simple, Mom. She's older than me." The words lingered in the air, and Evelyn blinked, unsure she had heard right. "Older?" she repeated softly. "Yes," he said quickly, searching her eyes for judgment. "Not just a little older. Quite a bit. And I know what you're probably thinking, but she's different. She's kind. She's understanding. And she makes me feel seen in ways I didn't think anyone could." Evelyn didn't speak right away. Her thoughts raced, trying to catch up. She hadn't expected this. She could sense his nervousness, how much courage it had taken him to say it aloud. She didn't want to crush him, didn't want to turn this moment into shame. So she steadied herself, folded her hands, and asked quietly, "Does she make you happy?" Daniel's expression softened instantly. He nodded with conviction, his eyes shining in a way she hadn't seen in years. "More than I can explain." That look on his face told her everything. He wasn't experimenting. He wasn't unsure. He was in love. And no matter what doubts she might have, Evelyn knew that look was not something she could ignore. The room grew quiet again, the weight of the revelation filling every corner. Evelyn felt a tangle of emotions in her chest. A part of her was protective, wondering if he would be safe from heartbreak. Another part of her remembered what it was like to be young and consumed by unexpected love, the kind that arrived without asking permission. She wanted to caution him, but she also wanted to believe in the glow she saw in his eyes. She placed her hand over his, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Then tell me about her," she said softly. Daniel's shoulders relaxed as though he had been holding his breath. In that moment, Evelyn realized he hadn't just come to share news, he had come for understanding, for reassurance that the person who knew him best in the world would listen without judgment. And she, despite her surprise, chose to give him that. The night stretched on as he began to speak, his words tumbling out in a rush. For Evelyn, time seemed to pause, caught between the shock of what she was learning and the tenderness of knowing her son trusted her enough to share it. She leaned back, listening intently, her mind both unsettled and strangely awakened. It had started with a simple knock on her bedroom door, but Evelyn knew, deep down, that nothing about this night was simple. This was a turning point, not just for Daniel, but for her as well. The quiet house, the midnight stillness, the nervous look in her son's eyes, it all marked the beginning of a new story, one that would unfold in ways neither of them could yet imagine. They sat together on the couch, the lamp casting a soft glow between them. Evelyn watched her son closely, searching his face for answers he wasn't yet ready to give. Daniel's fingers drummed nervously against his knee, his eyes darting between the floor and her. The silence was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Evelyn waited, patient but tense, knowing that whatever he was about to say would matter. Daniel leaned back, exhaling deeply as if carrying a weight. "Mom, she's not who you'd expect." His voice trembled slightly, though he tried to steady it. "She's older than me. Much older." The words hung in the air. Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. Older? That wasn't what she had imagined. She had thought he might confess to rushing too fast into a relationship, or maybe choosing someone not right for him. But this was different, and the surprise left her still. "How much older?" Evelyn asked carefully, not wanting to sound harsh. Daniel hesitated. "She's in her 40s. He swallowed hard, bracing himself. "I know what you might think. But Mom, it's real. I didn't plan it. I didn't go looking for it. It just happened." Evelyn felt her breath catch. The difference was undeniable, yet the way he spoke carried no doubt. He was not defending a mistake. He was describing something that had touched him deeply. She could see it in his eyes, the way they lit up when he said her name, though he hadn't shared it yet. "Tell me," Evelyn said softly. "What is it about her?" Daniel's lips curved into the faintest smile. "She listens, not just with words, but with her whole heart. She doesn't judge me, doesn't make me feel small. She makes me feel enough. For the first time in my life, I feel like someone truly understands me." Evelyn leaned back against the cushions, her heart conflicted. A mother's instinct was to protect, to shield her child from choices that might hurt. But the glow in Daniel's eyes was unmistakable. He wasn't confused. He was alive with something rare. "Do you love her?" she asked quietly. His answer came without hesitation. "Yes." The certainty in his voice struck Evelyn deeply. It reminded her of her younger years, when she too had believed in love that defied logic. She remembered the thrill of being seen, of being valued beyond the surface. A flicker of nostalgia touched her, followed quickly by worry. She didn't want him to experience heartbreak, yet she couldn't ignore the sincerity pouring out of him. "What about her?" Evelyn pressed gently. "What does she feel for you?" Daniel's smile softened. "She cares for me just as much. She's told me I'd brought her joy she thought she'd lost. She's been through a lot in her life, but with me, she says she feels alive again." Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by the tenderness in his words. She thought about the woman he described, someone seasoned by life, someone who carried her own scars yet found healing in his presence. It wasn't the story she had expected her son to bring home, but it was undeniably real to him. "You understand," Evelyn said slowly, "that people may not accept this easily." Daniel nodded firmly. "I know. But I don't care. I'm not looking for approval from everyone. I just needed to know what you thought." His voice softened. "What you feel matters most to me." That pierced her heart. She realized he wasn't only sharing a secret, he was placing his trust in her. He wanted her blessing, or at least her understanding, more than anything else. The love he carried wasn't just about this woman. It was also about needing his mother to stand by him through it. Evelyn looked at him with quiet intensity. "Daniel, all I want is your happiness. If this woman gives you that, then I will not stand in the way. But you must promise me one thing." "What's that?" he asked. "That you'll be careful. That you'll think with your heart. Yes, but also with your mind. Love is powerful, but it can also be fragile. Protect it. Don't let it blind you." Daniel nodded, relief flooding his expression. "I promise." For the first time that night, Evelyn allowed herself a small smile. She reached out, covering his hand with hers. The warmth of the gesture steadied them both. He had carried fear of rejection when he knocked on her door, but now there was a sense of peace between them. The conversation stretched on, Daniel sharing small details about the woman who had captured his heart. He spoke of their conversations, their laughter, the way she made ordinary days feel extraordinary. Evelyn listened, her heart a mix of wonder and unease, but also touched by the openness of her son. As the night grew later, Evelyn realized that love came in forms she hadn't expected. Her son had chosen a path that might invite questions, perhaps even criticism, but his heart was genuine. And though she couldn't predict what the future held, she knew one truth: love, in any shape, deserved respect when it carried honesty and cared. By the time they rose from the couch, the clock had passed 1 in the morning. Evelyn hugged Daniel tightly, her voice gentle against his shoulder. "Whatever happens, you'll always have my support." Daniel's arms tightened around her, and she felt the gratitude in his embrace. For him, the hardest part was over. For Evelyn, a new chapter of understanding had just begun. The house returned to silence once more, but Evelyn's heart was far from still. She had seen something in her son that night: hope, vulnerability, and a kind of love that wasn't bound by rules. It unsettled her, but it also stirred something forgotten within her own heart. As she lay awake later, she knew one thing for certain: their lives had changed with that midnight conversation, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. That night, when the house grew still again, Evelyn lay in her bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep refused to come. Daniel's words echoed through her mind. "She understands me in ways no one else has." The sincerity in his eyes, the calm strength in his voice, the way he spoke of this woman, it had unsettled her in ways she couldn't quite explain. She should have been resting, but her heart and mind were alive with thoughts she hadn't entertained in years. Loneliness had been her quiet companion since her divorce. She had raised Daniel with all her strength, pouring herself into his future, while ignoring the ache inside her own chest. Nights were often long, filled with silence, with only the ticking clock and the shadows on the walls to keep her company. She had told herself she was fine, that she didn't need anyone anymore. Yet tonight, hearing her son speak of love with such certainty, something inside her stirred awake. She turned onto her side, clutching the pillow. When was the last time someone looked at me the way Daniel described? She could hardly remember. Years had passed since she had been admired, desired, or deeply understood. She had grown used to routine: wake up, go to work, come home, cook dinner, clean, sleep. Daniel had his own life now, and though he still lived with her for the time being, She knew his future was slowly pulling him away. Soon, she would be alone in this house, her life echoing only with her footsteps. The thought unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Daniel had spoken of love with such freshness, such fire. And though she was happy for him, it reminded her of what she had lost. The warmth of companionship, the thrill of connection, the simple comfort of sitting with someone who noticed the smallest things, her sighs, her silences, her unspoken needs. She closed her eyes and tried to silence the ache, but memories pressed forward. She remembered her younger days, when love had felt easy, when a glance could carry the promise of forever. She remembered her first dates, her first dances, the thrill of whispered secrets in the dark. Somewhere along the way, all of that had faded, leaving only a shell of responsibility and survival. She had grown strong, yes, but at the cost of her softer self. Evelyn sat up, restless, and walked to the window. The night was quiet outside, the street empty, the sky sprinkled with faint stars. She hugged her robe tighter and whispered, almost to herself, "Maybe it's not too late." The words surprised her. She hadn't said them aloud before, hadn't dared to consider the possibility. But now, the thought lingered. Could love still find her, even after all these years? Could her heart still open, or had it locked itself away for good? She thought of the woman Daniel loved, older, experienced, carrying her own history. Perhaps that was why Daniel admired her so much. Perhaps maturity didn't mean the end of love, but the beginning of something richer. Evelyn wondered if she had been wrong all along, believing her chance had passed. Maybe love wasn't reserved for the young. Maybe it was for anyone brave enough to welcome it, even when it arrived unexpectedly. The hours slipped by. She returned to bed, but her mind wouldn't rest. She thought of Daniel's smile, the way he lit up while speaking about his relationship. She thought of her own empty evenings, the long stretches of silence. She thought of what it might feel like to have someone reach across the table, hold her hand, and remind her she was still worth loving. By the time the clock struck 2, Evelyn had admitted something to herself. She was lonely, and she longed for more. She wasn't envious of Daniel, not exactly, but his words had awakened a longing she had pushed aside for far too long. She lay back down, staring at the ceiling again. If Daniel could be brave enough to follow his heart, maybe I could too. The thought brought a quiet strength to her. She wasn't sure how or when, but she knew she couldn't keep living only in the safety of her routines. She wanted laughter again, conversation again, the spark of being truly seen. Her heart softened at the idea. Maybe life still had surprises waiting for her. Maybe love wasn't gone. It was simply hiding, waiting for the right moment to knock on her door. Just like Daniel had. And when it did, she promised herself she wouldn't turn it away. The night pressed on, but Evelyn no longer felt burdened by silence. Instead, she felt a small flicker of hope, faint but steady. A seed had been planted in her heart, one that reminded her she was more than a mother, more than a woman defined by her past. She was still alive, still capable of love, still deserving of happiness. She closed her eyes, her lips forming the quietest whisper. Maybe love will find me, too. And with that thought, she finally drifted into sleep, carrying with her a sense of possibility she hadn't felt in years. The morning sun spilled through the curtains, filling the kitchen with soft golden light. Evelyn moved slowly, her mind still heavy from the long night of restless thoughts. She set the kettle on the stove, the sound of boiling water breaking the stillness. She poured coffee into 2 mugs, her hands trembling just slightly. She knew Daniel would come soon. She could feel it. His presence always had a way of filling the house before he even walked into the room. Sure enough, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Daniel appeared in the doorway, his hair tousled from sleep, but his eyes alert, cautious. He hesitated before stepping in, as if unsure how she had processed everything from the night before. Evelyn looked at him, her heart softening. He was her son, but he was also a man now, carrying secrets, dreams, and love she had not seen in him before. "Morning," he said carefully. "Morning," Evelyn replied, pushing one mug toward him. "Sit." He sat across from her, wrapping his hands around the warm cup but not drinking yet. Silence stretched between them for a moment, filled only by the quiet ticking of the kitchen clock. Daniel finally drew a breath, his voice gentle. "Mom, I know last night was a lot. I could see it in your face. But there's something more I need to tell you." Evelyn braced herself, nodding for him to go on. "I want you to meet her," Daniel said. His eyes held hers firmly, as though he feared she might refuse. "Not someday. Soon. She means so much to me, and I want you to see why." Evelyn's chest tightened. She had expected this, but hearing it aloud carried a weight. Meeting this woman would make everything real. It wasn't just a midnight confession, it was his life. She reached for her mug, holding it steady even as her heart raced. "Are you sure she's ready to meet me?" Evelyn asked softly. Daniel nodded. "She's nervous, but she wants to. She knows how important you are to me." That touched her deeply. Despite all the uncertainty, Daniel's respect for her never wavered. He wanted her to be part of this, not left in the dark. Evelyn studied his expression, the sincerity in his eyes, the quiet hope in his voice. She could not deny him this. "All right," she said finally. "If she's important to you, then she's important to me. I'll meet her." Relief washed over Daniel's face. His shoulders relaxed, and a faint smile broke through his nervousness. He leaned across the table, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Thank you, Mum," he whispered. Evelyn hugged him back, her heart full yet uncertain. She had given him her blessing, but inside, she felt a storm of emotions: fear, curiosity, and a flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. When they pulled apart, Daniel finally took a sip of coffee, his eyes brighter than they had been in weeks. "You'll see, Mom. She's different. She's someone who makes me want to be better. I know it's unusual, but I can't imagine my life without her." Evelyn smiled faintly, though her thoughts drifted elsewhere. His words echoed the longing she had whispered to herself the night before. The desire to be understood, to be seen, to feel alive again. Watching her son discover that kind of connection filled her with pride, but also reminded her of her own emptiness. As Daniel spoke more about his plans, Evelyn found herself half listening, half dreaming. The way he described laughter shared over late-night dinners, the comfort of simple conversations, the peace of knowing someone truly cared. These were the very things she missed most. She realized she wasn't only supporting her son. She was confronting her own longing. The kitchen filled with the smell of coffee and the soft hum of morning. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt the weight of change. Life had shifted overnight. Her son had chosen a path that might raise eyebrows, but it was his path, and he was walking it with conviction. She admired that courage. When Daniel finally rose from the table, ready to face the day, Evelyn touched his arm. "Daniel," she said softly, "thank you for trusting me with your heart. Whatever comes, I'll be here." He smiled, kissed her forehead, and left the room. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the house, leaving Evelyn alone with her thoughts once more. She carried her mug to the window, watching the sunlight dance across the garden. The world outside looked the same, yet everything inside her felt altered. Last night she had been only a mother lying awake with worry. This morning, she was a woman reminded that love could arrive at any age, in any form. Without warning, her son's journey had stirred something inside her. Something that told her her own story wasn't over. The ache of loneliness she had lived with didn't have to define her future. If Daniel could find love in unexpected places, maybe she could too. Evelyn set down the mug, a small smile curving her lips. She didn't know when or how, but she knew this. Her heart was ready to open again. Love had many faces: romantic, maternal, unexpected, and sometimes it knocked on the door in the middle of the night, changing everything. That morning, as the sun rose higher, Evelyn felt a spark she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just Daniel's new beginning. It was hers too.